Great. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for our Cohort 2 professional development meeting. And I see we have some Cohort 1 folks here as well, which is awesome. Today, we have some special guests presenting for the Early Childhood Special Education team. We have Julie Giacconi and Lou Collins and Susie Perry, who will be sharing. I know we've already shared the information with you before. You got that in an email. And this is going to be another one of those flipped classroom models, but we want to review some of the information and then we have some questions as well to start some discussions. So I will turn it over to our team.
Thank you, Sandy. Let me get this up on our screen. Make sure that I'm sharing. So can everyone see the slide deck now? Okay, great. So as Sandy mentioned, this is going to be a flipped classroom. I'm not sure if you recognize, but this is one of those good old KWD or KWL or KWLD charts. So what we're going to provide for you is more of a refresher and an overview of exclusion. Maine's regs and policies around exclusionary discipline. And then we're going to see and open it up to all of you to see what's going on in your districts. What's working, what's not working, what concerns do you have, what questions do you have? So now I'm going to flip it to Susie.
Hi there. Thanks, Julie. I'd like to introduce all of our presenters. Sandy did mention who was going to be on the call today, but we have Julie, who was just on and speaking. We have Lou Collins, who is going to be sharing information with us today, and I'm Susie Perry.
Okay, thank you very much. Susie, did you want to flip to the next slide?
Oh, you have the control. There we go. So we have some source documents. These are communications that have come out from the Department of Education, Maine Department of Education, regarding suspension, expulsion, restraint and seclusion. So what we wanted to do is provide you with the links to them and a little description for your future reference.
Yes, and the driver for change in Maine's regs and laws had to do with information and data that the state has been receiving for quite some time. In 2019, the Alliance for Early Success published a report detailing all of this. Our historical data back in 2005 showed we had the second highest preschool expulsion rate. The crisis in 2014 and really for the last 20 years has been a rise in challenging behaviors in the preschool classrooms, with 86% of teachers reporting at least one child with challenging behavior. I know that behavior is usually a very calm topic. No one ever has any questions about it. But if you do during this, place them in the chat and we'll be talking about it. I know Aaron has a little better background of the Alliance for Early Success. Aaron, I don't know if you want to mention that.
I do not have a background in the Alliance for Early Success.
Sorry.
But it sounds like a fascinating organization.
What all of that led to, and this was in conjunction with the Maine Children's Alliance, and Rita Furlow was a part of that, was legislative action. And we now have statutes and rules in place that discuss and determine how we in public schools can behave and how we can react to challenging behaviors. So on the next slide, there are the first two are Maine statute, which differ from our regs, which we'll get to in a second. But the governing statutes, if you ever want to read them, they're there there's a link for you to look at them. 101.8a governs expulsion, 101.9 governs out of school suspension. And then the rule chapters, 124 is how you get approved for your public preschool programs. Chapter 33, which I'm sure every special ed director is well aware of, has to do with restraint and seclusion. And finally, there's the federal law that guides all the state laws and what we operate under. And next slide. I think the takeaway, if anyone takes anything away from all of the regs and laws you're looking at and the data we've had, is that for preschool children, expulsion is prohibited. And it says once a child is enrolled in a public preschool program, they cannot be unenrolled or expelled. But even with that, we can't deny enrollment in a public preschool program because of behaviors, because of being not toilet trained. Every child has a right to attend a public preschool. And once they're in and attending, you can't kick them out. As tempting as it may be on some days, our law prohibits it. And the intent, obviously, is for us to serve all kids, even kids with diverse needs. Obviously, they should be part of the classroom all day. And the guidance, obviously, is that exclusionary discipline is viewed as not age appropriate. Obviously, it hinders the goal of prepping kids for school success. Next slide.
So suspension, moving into the policy around suspensions, while expulsion is strictly prohibited, suspension is strictly limited. So the general rule is that out-of-school suspension is prohibited for children in grades 5 or below. There is an exception, and the exception is two-pronged. So a principal may authorize suspension only if there's imminent danger or serious physical injury to the student themselves or those around the student. And lesser restrictive interventions have been or would be ineffective. And evidence of these interventions. So there's a time limit with regard to suspension cannot exceed more than 3 days. There is a federal exception, which I don't think applies to this age group, around the Federal Gun-Free Schools Act. I think it's important to remember that these little ones are newbies. They're not public school veterans that have been in school for several years, so they're new to these learning environments. This information is taken from the administrative letter, guidance for expulsion, suspension, and you'll see at the bottom of these two slides, there's a link. There's a lot of live links in the slides so that whatever we're speaking to, there's actually a link in the slide that can bring you right to that information. So modified schedules, I know Muser calls them abbreviated day, is reducing a child's school day or school week due to behavior needs. There are restrictions where the SAUs cannot unilaterally determine that a child is on a modified schedule. So in other words, they can't determine that without the family being involved as part of that IEP team and part of the decision-making group. So requirements of the parents and caregivers must be involved in that process. Parents must agree to the schedule before it's implemented. Again, this is not a replacement or a substitute for suspension. So it has to be viewed in terms of interim intervention within a multi-tiered system of supports, and there needs to be a plan in place to bring the child back to a regular full day schedule. And again, this is only considered when multiple accommodations have already been tried and we have evidence that those accommodations and those strategies didn't work. And Erin, please feel free to jump in.
I just want, because this is a little bit confusing for us who are new in this area. I want to just be very clear. This is not what you know as abbreviated day for IEP for children with IEPs. Okay. And we're going to be having a separate conversation about that, but this is not connected to abbreviated day. Just want to make that clear.
We'll flip over to Susie.
Okay. So with respect to restraint and seclusion, and maybe many of the topics that we're talking about right now, they're generally attuned to older children and children that have been in public school for a while. But now we're starting to, now that we're bringing preschool-aged children into our public schools, thinking about restraint and seclusion, we want to bring up this topic. And and help us to have a conversation about that physical restraint in its application to preschool-aged children and preschool-aged children with disabilities. So the policy talks about limiting the use of physical restraint, and I'm sure you've seen all of this before, but we may not, as of up till now, thought about it in terms of preschool-aged children. What I understand in Maine is that safety care training is one of the more prevalent trainings that are used as preventative measures for ensuring that when restraint or seclusion needs to be used, that it's done in the appropriate way. So there's then, let's go on to the next slide.
Sorry, Susie. There's an approved list of programs that I will put in the chat that are, but the noticeable thing here is that only trained individuals who are certified in the approved training can do these actions.
Okay, thank you. There's data reporting required. We do have technical assistance, and I think that's probably what Erin is sharing, is that some of the resources and requirements around that, and that ultimately we're emphasizing student safety, using trauma-informed practices, and least restrictive approaches. Okay, next slide. Was this me? Oh, sorry. And finally, some of our resources and opportunities that the early learning team has great resources for in early intervention. There's technical assistance from the public preschool side of things. We have a team in Maine that is implementing the pyramid model practices, which are really incredible strategies that nationally many states are using to support teacher practices and supporting children with challenging behaviors. And we have saw at least one previous session from our cohort sessions on behavior strategies and supports. And that one specifically looking a little bit more closely at the challenges around toilet training and supports for ensuring that children that have not yet been toilet trained have access to their programs, are not prevented from attending the programs because of that situation. So I think we're going to be moving on to some of our questions and answers.
Yeah, and we had a kind of a side bet, the three of us presenters. We had envisioned there would be about 40 or 50 questions in the chat, because the topic of behavior, suspension, expulsion is such a hot topic in public schools. And every district that I was a superintendent or special ed director in, it came up every day. My last district, we had a 4-year-old whose interfering behavior included urinating and spitting on staff. So I know it's out there. I know that many rural districts might not even have appropriately certified staff for restraint and seclusion. I know it's difficult sometimes to get safety care or CPI to your school district to train your staff or to send them out. So we're hoping that, and please don't be shy. There's a lot of school staff out there with a lot of questions. What's happening in your district? What challenges are you seeing? What are some really good strategies you've used? Share them with us and your fellow directors and staff here. What training do you think your staff requires to attend proactively? What do they need? And are any of you already involved in PBS or Pyramid? And so the first one who goes gets an award. Anybody out there?
I'm going to come off of share so that we can all see each other. Here we go.
I know Marcy Whitcomb put in the chat that Safety Care does also offer a school-age children training for classroom and group management. And we talked a lot in our prep for this about regular general classroom management strategies and how It's so critical, not just with preschoolers, but whether you're a senior, you're a high school teacher, a middle school teacher, day one in classroom management is so critically important. So safety care does offer that. I think Aaron or Sandy, I think CPI is also, I didn't look at your list, Aaron, but I think CPI is also one.
Yeah, there are a surprising number of training programs that are all, and it's important to remember that these are de-escalation programs. So that's the best thing about them, is that the point is to avoid putting hands on anybody, which no one goes to work wanting to do. So there's like about 20 programs that are in use across the state. Safety care has kind of an interesting, they have 2 modules that you can give. I used to do this in my prior district, kind of globally give to folks so that everybody who's teaching in a classroom has some basic understanding about what escalates behavior and what de-escalates behavior. And so there's things that you can do kind of in a multi-tiered system of support to kind of, and certainly PBIS is along that vein as well, in terms of making sure that people understand, kind of the antecedents for behavior and how that plays out and what's motivating the behavior and all those kinds of things. So yes, I'd say it's important training for more than just your specialists to have too. I would say you don't want just like 1 or 2 people in your building trained to do this.
We have in the chat from Michelle, is anyone using something I've never heard of? Yukaru. Have you heard of that, Aaron?
Oh yeah, it's a big deal. It's a big deal because we have one of our special purpose schools using it, and they've almost eliminated restraint. It's very interesting. It's from Japan, which I also love, but it's very an interesting, and there's a lot out there on it. I know a lot of our advocates are in support of Ukero because it kind of can reduce restraints and seclusions.
So for all of you, particularly special ed directors out there, please put any questions you have in the chat, and maybe a springboard for some of that is, what's the first thing you do when a teacher comes to you and says, I have a kid who's out of control in my classroom? What's the first thing you do to try to assist? And there's somebody with a hand up here, Christine Smith.
So I just wanted to share that in MS 8017, where we have a partnership with Head Start. And so we have all of our teachers are currently trained in safety care. And we are also, we use the sort of a tier 2 intervention of an individual child care plan or a child plan. And usually that happens with that's a family meeting where the family and the school and the community agency come together to meet with everybody to determine what supports need to be put in place to support the child and the family while the child is experiencing a difficult time at school. And usually one of the things that happens is a referral to special education. And so what I've seen happen thus far is that referral has happened, and the result has been for an IEP, and that IEP calls for more intensive services that I can't provide. And so now I'm in a place where I don't have a placement for a student who requires a more intensive supports. I have an IEP that describes that, and I have a little one that's not getting what they need. And that's on an IEP and evident in the child care plan. So they're on like a reduced day. And I don't know what to do about that.
Is this IEP, did it basically say self-contained programming or special purpose programming?
Right.
Okay. And you're in Western Maine, if I remember correctly.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question all across the state. I know up in Washington County, it's almost impossible to find a program for kids with very severe behavioral disorders to go to. And you're right. you're left with, you had a modified day school schedule discussion at the IEP meeting, I'm assuming.
Yeah, well, yes, we did. And we are trying to figure out, I mean, originally we described on the IEP a full day. Um, that's what we're ideally looking for through the IEP. That's what the child requires. Um, but we can't provide any of that because I don't have a placement.
I see Erin has her hand raised,
I
and I
do.
can
I do.
also,
Go ahead.
well, no, I was just going to say, Christine, this might be something that we can connect with you to help problem solve, looking
Yeah,
at
you and
that.
I have, yeah, we've done that.
And knowing that you already have a partnership with the CDS preschools, is that program full as well?
Yeah, that's where he came from.
Uh,
So yeah. So he didn't
Okay.
go to CDS, he went at Head Start, but the CDS program doesn't have enough staff to cover his need. They're sort of programming more towards a different kind of child and different kinds of needs.
Okay. Well, you and I can chat, but let's see what Erin has to say as well.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I've been encouraging all of our special purpose schools is, and CDS now is doing it as well, is creating programs and embedding programs into places where they don't have that level of programming. So there are SPPSs right now around the state who are partnering with SAUs, even sometimes staffing them so that they can build these programs and train staff. And that is something that when you're in a rural location, are not, you're going to have this child, um, unless, for some reason they move, but you'll have another one right behind them,
Yep, yep.
So I'm telling you, it's more prolific as we know now in schools. So your best bet is to, develop that programming yourself. And there's a lot of partners in the state and out of the state too. I mean, when I was in Mid-Coast, we partnered with New England Center for Children. Lou remembers that, and
Yep.
brought a day treatment program, brought all of our kids back from out of unit placements. And so there are options of building, growing your own programming, and there's resources out there to help you. And we can certainly talk to you more about that.
What about the option of putting a 4-year-old into the K program?
Yeah.
It could go really well, very
Yep.
well.
Okay.
Because again, who are children most motivated by? Children. So if there's older children, maybe they have better skills. That could be really successful.
So if we have a social emotional program at our K level, that's possible to think about including them in that, leveling them up to that.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Okay.
Many of our
Thank you.
schools do that may not have the enrollment need for
Yeah.
a program, so you can have multi-age programs.
Right. Okay.
Mhm.
I'm going to go back to the original springboard question. I know that there are special ed directors out there who can put in the chat or tell us what is the first thing you do when you have a pre-K or any teacher tell you a kid's out of control, whether they are in special ed or not. And then for the rest of you, all of you, what are you doing right now that seems to be really working well? Because I think we'd all like to hear some of that. So anybody who wants to chime in, I know that schools are doing very unique things, like they were just mentioning partnerships with special purpose programs. I'm getting a chat message here. Perfect. First thing you do is meet with a teacher for input, then observation. SMOT, as Eric Curlin would used to say. I remember when I would get emails and phone calls and panic phone calls from the pre-K teacher about a kid who was out of control. The very first thing I did was schedule routine observations, including the ABC, the antecedent behavior consequence chart. Because so often with behavior, when we're in the middle of it as a teacher, we can't see things like a good BCBA or a good special ed director or another teacher can see. What's setting them off? What's triggering that kid? And when he's triggered, what do we do about it? And that information gives us so much to work with. So I loved your answer about the first thing you do is observe, go see what's going on. And Susie just put in again, here are our questions to the group. What is happening in your districts? Anybody out there? What's going on? Everything's perfect. No behavior issues. I love it. It's the way it should be in January.
I don't know how to raise my hand, so I'll
There you
just
go.
start. So often, we start seeing this and it depends on, the level of concern. We've got our 3, 4, 5-year-olds that are peeing all over the floor, and that's kind of their defense mechanism, or crawling and, running out of the building. It depends on what the level of concern is and safety. We've often had pulled in special ed with parent permission while, even before, as part of the MTSS process, just because they're the experts, right? So we'll pull in BCBAs and we'll do observations, and we'll, exactly what you're talking about, and get some input on implementing some kind of behavior programming. And if we can't make changes and adjustments quickly enough, and then we may move more quickly into special ed referrals. We try not to move super quickly, but sometimes it's a level of danger. So you have to, you can't slow it down as much as you'd like to, like with the normal MTSS process. But we've had, over the years, as you've said, an increasing amount of behavior. We've had our people becoming, training our people to become experts. We have several teachers that are BCBAs, and we have a great BCBA, who is working with us and just has a huge caseload. But we're seeing improvement. Sometimes it gets to the point where, is this more traumatizing for the kid, especially if it's a pre-K situation? And we work with parents on, giving the kid a break for a time, trying modified days. And then eventually, with one of our kiddos, we got to the point of, okay, we need to look at an outside placement because, we can't do it here. We want the kid to be successful. And when you're in pre-K and kindergarten and you're having these huge episodes daily, you really need to start looking at how to interrupt that pattern.
What district are you with, Lisa?
26 in Orono.
Yeah, okay. I'm glad that you have a resource like BCBA and experts on staff. I just want to do a shout out to all the rural districts I know who are saying,
Right.
anything to have somebody on staff who could come take and help us with this kid. So for all of you out there who don't have that, please let us know however you want to, and we will get you names of resources you may be able to contact, and they could help you over Zoom. They might be able to help you in person. I recruited from Jonesport all the way down to Portland and had a BCBA come up. It was expensive, but worth every penny. So Lisa, you're talking about that continuum as well, right? That you start out and then you finally get to the point where you're realizing that no matter what you're doing, it's not working and the class is being disrupted every single day.
Right. And I feel like, this is my 6th year here, and I feel like my staff has gotten better and better and better at handling this. Just really implementing safety care with fidelity and being just reporting on things as we should. And I've really been impressed with the behavior plans, and that hasn't always been my style, but just observing. Data collection is huge, and you put something in place and you collect data that speaks to your instruction, whether you need to change it or continue it. But yeah, from all the way to, yes, we were able to change this student's behavior to the point where they don't even qualify for services at this point, to, okay, we need to go to an outside placement. Every situation is different.
So the data did tell you stuff. You would say, oh my goodness, here's what triggers him all the time. Here's
Right.
when he triggered.
Right, or time of day, or
Yeah.
or you implement something and you see a reduction, or something happens at home or something happens at school and you see an increase. So, just really following that data and understanding it.
And where did you get all this wonderful training? Because you sound like you know what you're doing.
Boots on the ground. I
Boots on the
mean,
ground.
we've
Yeah.
we've like everybody else, we've had an increase. I mean, I get safety care trained. I get called down when there are not enough hands, and I'm just willing to send people to get training. And we need to support our people. This is a high burnout job.
Amen. Thanks. Well, I'm just really happy that so many folks don't have these issues because I've heard from a couple of you. I sound like a nag, but I'm really curious what's going on with other schools out there. Are you seeing this? Have you been able to have boots on the ground training? And are you seeing any challenging behaviors that frustrate you right now? We have someone in the chat. Boy, you want to read that one, Susie? That's an interesting one.
Sure. A challenge that might be anticipated in the mixed delivery system is being able to provide the training, consistency, and support needed to do interventions for even classroom management with fidelity.
Wow. And a mixed delivery system, a private pre-K, for instance, because we're going to have kids in there. Yeah.
Yeah, for those situations, you would still want to do exactly what you've been talking about. Start the observations, ask the provider to collect as much data as they can, and offer support through the lens of the IEP or any other supports that you have. Think of those placements in your mixed delivery system just as an extension of a classroom that you might have in your school. And also, as you're looking at that continuum of placements, making sure that those the providers out in the community are engaged in any trainings that you might have. Like I'm thinking, when I was a director, you might have some trainings throughout the year with our BCBA to look at, how to do an FBA or what does this data mean? Let's look at data collection. So really engaging them in that work as well as much as they can participate. But if, I know this kind of ties into also the master agreement that's coming out, is that they are part of that continuum of placement. So you want to have that conversation about, is this the right environment for this child at this time? And are they getting their needs met in this setting as well? And Marcy, one of our local experts, I'm sure has more to add about this.
I just wanted to add something to be mindful of when you're working with your community providers, that a lot of them are highly trained because they have been working with these children since birth sometimes, but also they very often have children with challenging behaviors and special needs and IEPs in their programs regularly and consistently. So it's not necessarily a new thing for them. One thing that's really important to consider is most of the time, if not all the time, I don't know if it's a licensing standard or not, but they have in their handbooks and in their programming how they handle challenging behaviors and how they, like what they're sort of, for lack of better word, because I'm very tired right now, like disciplinary, sort of what that looks like for them. And really, when you're working with them and putting together an MOU, it's really a conversation of how does this look in your program? This is how it needs to look in a public school. How can we align that and bring that together? It's just part of building out that partnership. Another thing I just want to mention real quick, because this happened actually with a district that we were working with, they brought their community providers, ones that they're partnering with and ones that they are not, all together to do joint PD sessions. So everybody is aligned across that catchment area. And speaking to the assistant superintendent who scheduled it, he was very excited and said, it's the easiest thing we can do because we're already training our staff. It's not costing us anything extra. We're already doing it. We're inviting a few extra people in. So just as you're looking at your community providers and forming a mixed delivery in your catchment area, those are really important things to remember, that your providers in your area, they are not new at this. They are very well versed. They are very well trained. They have been doing this for a while.
We have some comments in the chat I'd just like to go over. Michelle Belanger said that engaging community partners and shared PD is a great plan. I couldn't agree more. I think we all think that's the way to go whenever we can. And Kate Stinson said, and this sounds fascinating, they've developed a monthly lunch and learn series with all of the community partners. They've done classroom accommodations and will be covering behavior supports this month. And then from Julianne Hansberry, we've provided training through our BCBA for our van drivers. And think of that, on how to handle behavior challenges with transportation. I mean, that's really, being proactive. And I know that our bus drivers, my goodness, they need all the help they can get. So I think that's a wonderful idea. We're learning a lot of different things that folks are doing. And I know engaging community partners and sharing your PD with them is not hard to do if you have the space, but inviting in those people when you're doing PD is a wonderful idea. And don't forget our bus drivers, even our lunch ladies. Anyone who needs to be trained, we can help out.
And we offered it over Zoom too, Lou, the lunch and learn. So it made it easy for people to just jump in.
Yeah, that's a biggie. And your BCBA is providing that training?
Actually, I did the last one. But we are lucky enough, I was going to write it there, we were lucky enough to hire a BCBA just for pre-K this year, dedicated to pre-K because there was such a need last year. So she obviously works with our special ed kiddos that need that support, but then she's also been going out to community partner programs to do informal screenings and provide just helpful feedback.
Wow. It's wonderful to have a BCBA. They're some of my favorite people, that and the speech therapists. But, interfering behaviors can really be a challenge, particularly if you haven't seen them before. And so many of our pre-K teachers who haven't had that opportunity to work with a diverse population, when they get them, it can be difficult. One of my most difficult behaviors to find replacements for is spitting behavior. I'm sure many of you have seen that. I had a little 4-year-old who came into our program, and as soon as he crossed the threshold to come down into the classroom, he would vomit. And then grandma would grab him and take him home. Then he'd come in the next day and he'd vomit, and grandma would take him home. Finally, our consulting psychologist took grandma aside and said, look, it's going to be hard, but I'm going to ask that you not take him home the next time. And guess what? After 4 days, the vomiting behavior disappeared. It was obviously an escape behavior. He wanted to go home with mommy, with grandma. So there are all these challenging behaviors we've all seen in our career. Spitting has got to be the worst in my book. Vomiting's not pretty. Peeing on your staff is not pretty. But we do get through it all. And again, I think with really good consultation, support, we can get there. But I agree, to all of you who haven't seen it before, those of you new to it, this is tough stuff. But you got a lot of colleagues here and everyone in the department who can help you. So shoot out questions to us whenever you need to. We'll try to find the resources for you. We'll try to find a neighboring district who has a BCBA that can help you. We're all willing to share. Is that right? Terrific, Kate. Thanks.
Absolutely. And we also want to help you troubleshoot, like with what Christine was saying, when you have those situations where you might be at that point where you're saying that this might not be the right placement on the continuum, how to support that process, always going through the lens of the IEP as well, and involving parents in that, and what other things you might want to try. Because we know it's a whole team that's there to support. It's the pre-K teacher, it's your special ed teacher, it's your building administrator, the special ed director. So you have a whole team there, and then we're here on our side as well to support. I've seen some great ideas today. I love the lunch and learn for the providers because that's when they might have a little bit of a break, right? When little ones are napping, that they can jump on or at least be invited to provide that. So that's such a great idea. It sounds like a lot of you are accessing BCBAs, and we've had great success with virtual BCBAs in the CDS world. So if you're a district that can't, connect with one in person, you might want to reach out to either us or some others on the screen that might have virtual, or sometimes probably like Lou, you might have had like in person one day a month and then virtual the rest of the time for meetings and data collection. And then I just want to share that I had a meeting with a district, a cohort 2 district, and I don't think that they are on here today, that wanted to share with us some of the data that they've collected. They started a in-district program this year with some support, and they were sharing the growth of the children just from September to January. And it was amazing, the decrease in behaviors that they are seeing. So, I mean, you guys are all doing this really hard work and we appreciate it. And one of the things that we talked about today in the meeting with the district was, imagine what life will be like for everyone in this child's life when they're in second grade, because you've done all of this really hard work now. I know we talk a lot about the benefits and reaping the awards of engaging in this transition, which might be really hard to see today, but the longevity of that we know will pay off for all of you.
We were able to dismiss a child today that qualified under developmental delay, and scores today were all in the solidly average range.
Well, great news.
That was fun.
Yeah, we had a director at the beginning of the year reach out to us and was, I don't know if I shared this before, but said, what do I do? They've met and exceeded all of their IEP goals. Like, what do I do now? And I'm like, well, you want to make sure they can maintain them. So it's the beginning of the year, but this is good news, right? This is what we want to hear, that there was no regression over the summer. So let's see how they do for the next couple months. And then, you know what to do. So she was like, I think they just got referred because, they were struggling. Yep, that's okay. That's all right. This is all good stuff.
Julie, we were talking before prepping this. I know another takeaway from this session should be every behavior serves a purpose for a child. Every behavior. It could be escape because they don't know how to do it or can't do it. It could be attention seeking because they don't get it elsewhere. A lot of kids come into our schools so trauma affected. And when you have a 3 and a 4-year-old whose home is that chaotic, a lot of the behaviors that you see are attention seeking. But Julie, you and I talked about that constellation of behaviors, that every single one of them, we may not think it for a minute. Why would he be peeing on me?
Right.
What possibly could that serve that kid?
Right.
But you want to just expand on that a bit as we talked?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is important that behaviors we see are communicating something. So the question is what are they communicating? And I know one of the tools that I've often used when I've gone into classrooms to provide technical assistance is an ecological assessment, where we look at the behavior and focus on the child who's having the most difficulty. But then we're also looking at a typical child in the classroom and what that behavior looks like, so we can make a comparison. And a lot of times after looking at that and looking at the data, we can come up with and effectively interpret what the behavior is communicating to us, and therefore then address it. But I also want to say too, one of the things I used to tell staff when I was working with them was a child's behavior isn't going to change until we change ours first.
Wow.
So if we keep doing what we've been doing, we're going to keep getting what we've been getting. So it's important to realize that, again, these are newbies, these are young ones that don't have this veteran experience of being in a public school setting. We don't know the backgrounds necessarily that they're coming from. And they are communicating something to us through their behavior. It's us to find out what's going to work. And I'm kind of curious out there. I know we have about just a couple minutes left, but tier 1 supports. What do districts feel as far as, do they need training? Could they benefit? Could their staff benefit from training with regard to tier 1 supports? How to engineer a classroom so that different learners have success navigating through the environment, navigating through the schedule of the day. I've worked with teachers on how to use their language as an instructional tool and a behavior support. I'm just kind of curious if anyone's out there feels that this would be something beneficial, or if there's another type of training, perhaps, that Brooke is like, yeah, sign me up.
Sign me up. Yes.
Okay, that's good to know. That is great to know, because we're all ongoing lifelong learners, and I'm sure everyone would agree that there's always room for improvement, especially since we keep getting these more diverse, more complex learners in our classrooms. And some of the things that they've experienced prior to coming to our classrooms have long-lasting effects that we are in the process. We're working together to for that child to experience success.
Well, there's 3 in the chat that's saying, yes, sign me up. And I'm just wondering if folks could put in the chat whether or not any of you or your staff have had either pyramid model and exposure or PBIS. Has that been something in your school, or has that just been hit and miss throughout the state? I'm really not sure.
I'm going to pipe in just for a quick second. I put something in the chat earlier, but I was driving and I have a couple of comments. We do PBIS. I think sometimes it's hard for teachers to necessarily understand how to do PBIS for pre-K. So it might be helpful to do some type of training around what the peers or the pillars of PBIS are and how that might look in pre-K. The other thing I was thinking about, and I put this in the chat, that was very helpful for us, is we had our BCBA who we contract with, but she also contracts with other districts. So that's something to think about for folks that have a small budget. And she did an assent-based learning, which was really helpful for us. It was new in the fact that it was all about like minimizing challenging behaviors. And the way that you do that is really by teaching young children, especially the population of pre-K that we work with, like how to say no, like they don't have to come to the rug. And so why do they wanted to come to, like, think about the story you told earlier, the kid vomited to get out of it. But if he just said, hey, I'm nervous about going to school, that would have been very different. So just being able to teach kids the way to appropriately say, this is too much, I can't do this, whether it's through visuals or place to go. Like last cohort 2, I think it was Michelle and maybe Tracy, I can't quite remember. They did a really nice presentation on how to arrange the classroom and environmental factors, which I think was also brought up. So I feel like there's so much tier 1 intervention, universal design, setting up your classroom so that children can communicate with you in any way all the time. And I've been teaching for 20 plus years in this field in particular and have seen the transition come through, is the number one thing that's going to support the majority of students. Because even those ones with really significant behaviors, when they understand that they can say, I need a break, I need to go to the quiet cube, this is too much for me, I need to, then you're minimizing the behaviors that you're going to see, and then you can maximize the behaviors that you want to see.
Wow. That's really good stuff. We have in the chat.
I'm sorry, Kim, PBIS has dialed down to preschool, and that's called the pyramid model.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
And we do support training in that at the DOE. So you can just reach out to your DOE contacts and we can get you some support in that.
Okay, thanks.
Brooke and Karen have said in the chat, and I think we need to really pay attention to this. It's important for us to acknowledge how hard it is for a teacher to be asked to mentally manage all this while being peed on with an exclamation point. We're looking in that regard that we can step back to analyze the behaviors. I think it really is every teacher that I've ever gone to, number one, wanted to be heard. hear me out. Let me tell you what's going on. And then they wanted to be supported. Don't just come in and, do an observation and then give me nothing. Give me some
Just so you know.
tools.
Oh,
Yeah.
there's just icicles in the front, so I just.
Go ahead.
I think that was a mistake. Somebody came off mute.
Oh, well, thanks to Brooke and Karen, because I think all of us do want to acknowledge how difficult it is for our teachers to try to manage a classroom with such a diverse learning population. So, yeah, listening so they're heard and providing supports are the two things that we can do as administrators to make sure that they feel supported and that the kids are successful. It seems like we've solved all the behavior problems today.
I was just going to say, so it definitely sounds like as far as that folks could use some additional training on just tier one supports in the classroom that would actually benefit everyone. And some things are really so easy to implement. I'm curious if anyone has any other areas that they may need or they think they could use some training with.
I think the one thing I did here today as well is that for districts that don't have those resources on site, how they could partner with other districts or how the department could lead them to agencies that might be able to provide Zoom training. So I would encourage any director, please send us an email, let us know what your needs are, and we'll be more than happy to try to find that out, as well as I've heard 3 yeses for tier one. It sounds like that is something that we might be able to get in motion.
I was wondering what schools' capacities are for training. Do they have time kind of mapped out, available for teachers to be able to engage in that training, or would it be, like on a video that they could watch later and then have, I'm just trying to think like the method for obtaining that training that would be most beneficial to you.
My guess is most districts have their training regimen lined out in September for the school year. Some have open PD sessions, but most have it mapped out. But the idea of a video bank would be marvelous for anybody. I used to like that. You could do it at your own leisure and when you had time to do it. But I'm not sure with the rest of the state.
Yeah, I know our district has monthly half days devoted to PD, and we would have some openings for live trainings, but certainly the video piece would be accessible anytime. So,
And Julianne says asynchronous would be great. And I think a lot of people say, yep, let me do it on my own time.
I just
Cast
also want
while you drive. Oh, sorry, Marcy.
no, you're good. I just want to throw out there that asynchronously in the session that Michelle and I did last week, the week before, last month, I'm not sure when it was. I feel like whenever it was. In the last slide in that slide deck, there's way too many resources, but I think one of the top ones are the IRIS modules. They're from, I can't remember where they're from. It's not
Vanderbilt.
Is it
Vanderbilt.
Vanderbilt? Okay, I was going to say that, but it didn't send it out to me. They have amazing asynchronous modules around sort of building expectations in the classroom, challenging behaviors, those sort of things. We have done a training with the field using those modules, and we've gotten some really good feedback, but they're phenomenal. So that link is in that slide deck from last session.
And Marcy, I'm assuming I've heard this, but I actually haven't seen it, but Maine Roads to Quality also has quite a bit.
Yes, there are links. Same thing. Yep. Thank you, Sandy. Same thing in that slide deck. There are links. There's one that's just started today. What's today? Wednesday. There's one session that started today. It's collaborating with others for inclusion. They have positive support for challenging behaviors with young children, building an inclusive pre-K classroom, partners in caring, working with families around all of everything, and a whole bunch of other ones. All those links are in there in that same slide deck too.
So I'm going to pipe in again. I've never talked in any of these meetings, and now I'm talking twice. So PD, I think, is such a great opportunity. I have found that it's very overwhelming. Like I go to the Department of Education and the special ed, and there's like all these links and all this stuff, and special ed, not special ed. I think, and then you go to Maine Road to Quality. There is so much. It is so challenging to find the right one. What's worth my time? How can I follow up with it? So I'm wondering if it wouldn't be I think it would be helpful, would be if someone could put together like a series, like, hey, these are 10, not all from the same one necessarily, but like, hey, these are 10 that would really get you started if you've never done it before. And then these are the ones that you might go to if you have some experience, but you're really looking for this. So that way, instead of trying to do a search for everything, it's the experts who have said, this was really helpful. This series worked really well for me. And then districts could sign up potentially to do that, but then also to maybe have a coach. So that way they get done with their, 4-week series or 5 asynchronous classes, but then they have an opportunity to meet together. Because I find that's one thing that happens. I do a lot of PD online, and then afterwards, without the opportunity to implement it or to talk with my team, it kind of goes by the wayside. So thinking about the idea of having it be a little bit more structured with some follow up, so that way people could ask the questions and actually implement what they're learning into their own districts, as opposed to kind of a global, hey, this worked, kind of for everyone.
That's a really good idea, Kim. I like that. I agree. Sometimes when you go into sites and you see like 1,000 different subjects, you don't know where to begin. I know one of the ones that I would hear from the most from teachers is that I can't collect data all day long. What do you want me to do? And we do ABC training with them. And the ABC, you can do interval time recording. It doesn't take up much of your time, but it gives you such valuable information about what triggers the behavior and what the consequence, what happens with it. So having an ability to be able to zone in, I just want to know about data collection, as opposed to weeding through 1,000 possible videos on that. It's a great idea. Thank you.
Well, it looks like we have one more minute. Any final questions or comments? Your participation in this. And just to let you know that we do have some upcoming PD sessions. We will be welcoming cohorts 3 and 4 in one of our PD sessions. We will also be looking at itinerant service model delivery, which is another way to strengthen support in the least restrictive environment. And I know everybody's favorite, we will also be doing some data, but this is the data for our federal reporting and other end of the year data that we will be collecting from you. So we have our schedule pretty much mapped out for the rest of the year. And as many of you know, we have the deadline to sign up for cohort 3 is Monday. So we should have that list soon, and we'll be inviting cohorts 3 and 4 and 1 to join us, because we feel like we always learn better with more people attending. And I know that folks from cohort 1 have been joining us because it's always good to hear the information again. So thank you for your time today, and have a great rest of your week. Stay warm and get your shovels out again, it looks like, right?
All except for Susie. Yep.
Yes, except for Susie. Thank you.
Everybody.